Alright, welcome to another episode of Dirt Cheap Daily. In this episode, we put the LSD rear differential in the Legacy GT. Alright, so I just tightened up all of the bolts on the rear cover. Last night I had it apart and inspected the differential and everything looks good. And so I painted the rear cover and RTV'd it. So I just bolted them hand tight. And then this morning I came back and I torqued them. And so now I'm going to use Rust-X. Rust-X is a chemical that inhibits rust. When you have rust, you can put Rust-X on it and it will stop it from continuing to rust. Hopefully. It's worked really good in the past, and I don't really want to paint this. I think it's a little too oily to paint, so I'm just going to hit it with Rust-X and call it good. This stuff is really crazy. It is safe to use on plastic and rubber, but it's really corrosive. And so I definitely use gloves while you're using it, because otherwise your hands will get fried. And basically this stuff just ruins rags. It eats through them, so once you use a rag on it, it's garbage. You just throw it away. So next on the list, we are going to pull out the old differential, or the stock differential from the Legacy GT. So the first thing is to come in and break the axle nuts loose. And then obviously we're going to take off our lug nuts too. So we want to come in and break loose these two bolts and take them out. They're the bolts that connect the knuckle to the actual strut. With that off, we'll be able to pull this back and get enough leverage to pull out our CV axle. You'll also, especially if you have a big rear sway bar like I do, have to come in and pull off one side of the end links. So I'm going to pull off the top just because it's easier to get to. See how much farther I can move around now? I can go way down to be able to pull this guy out. So you might notice that these look funny. These end links are aluminum end links, which is an upgrade from stock plastic. You can get them off of an Audi A6 or an Audi A4. Around 2001 to 2004 is the body style that these fit. These are the front end links that fit on the rear of a Subaru. I paid 10 bucks a piece for these, I think, maybe 15, which is significantly cheaper than paying about $100 for Whiteline, Cartboy, Perrin. A bunch of other companies make really stiff rear end links that are aluminum with polyurethane bushings. These ones are just rubber bushings, but they're brand new, and so basically anybody's rear end links are going to be shot. The plastic is going to be super easy to move around, and the rubber is going to be shot. So they're not really going to be doing that much. So even just getting aluminum with rubber is an upgrade. Not as much as aluminum with polyurethane, but 10 bucks compared to 100 bucks, that's good in my book. I figure I can swap these out multiple times before I get up to the price I would pay for polyurethane and aluminum. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is pull off this cover. So I PB'd all these before I started anything. I jacked the car up, slammed them with PB, dropped it back down, and then took the wheels and everything else off. So that the PB would have some time to penetrate, because these things can be pretty rusty. So there's 17s, there's 4 that are facing up, and there's 4 facing in. So pull all those off. They should be pretty easy to get off because I just took them off when I did the manual swap. But that's where you start. Then you have these ones on the sides. They're the 14s. My 1/2 inch is kind of big to fit in between the gas tank and that side, so I might have to come back with just an open end and hit him. For now, I'm gonna keep going and just buzz the rest of these off. Alright, so these two are a super pain to get to. Even with a 3/8 ratchet, you can barely fit it in there to break it loose, but you can't really pull it out any because it butts up against the gas tank here. So you just got to break it loose and then get an open end in there to do it. Now as you're pulling these apart, this is going to drop kind of the front of this down, because this big box assembly thing is what is holding up this tail shaft of the diff. So once everything is out, this can move up and down a bit. So this is holding it, this part here is holding it pretty well. So I'm just going to pull it out. Hopefully nothing will go wrong. Alright, so now this whole piece should pull down like that. I had a bunch of rocks up there and gravel. While we're here, we're going to come in and pull off the drive shaft to diff bolts. There's 4 of them. This really helps when you have somebody around, because a really easy way to break these loose, because you can't get a wrench on the backside, is with an open end. You put the e-brake on, and the e-brake is enough that you can break these loose. So you break it loose, pull it off, drop off the e-brake, twist this around to the next one, and so it's really easy when you have somebody else, because then they can just sit up there and pull the e-brake and drop the e-brake and pull the e-brake and drop the e-brake as you rotate this around, so you don't have to get out from under the car. It's kind of a hassle, but you know, that's kind of what I do. So hopefully you'll be able to see this, but this is actually a pretty good demonstration of why I'm putting in an LSD diff. So I'm going to turn the diff. I can't really get much of a grip on it, so I'm only going to turn it a little bit. But you can see how this one is moving, and this one's like hesitating, but only this one is turning. And so with this is an open diff, and so it's only really putting power to this tire here, to this axle. So when I put in the LSD, it should, when I do that, when I put it back in, it should put power to both. That is the hope, because now that it's rear wheel drive, I don't want all of the horsepower of the engine and all the torque coming out and going through one axle. I want it going through 2 axles. And with the LSD, it's a limited slip differential, and so instead of it being a solid differential, like if I were to weld this one, if I would weld this, it would put all of the power to both axles 100% of the time. And so it would be a 0 slip differential. A limited slip differential has a little clutch pack inside of it that limits slip, and basically what that does is when you turn a corner, your outside tire is going to be going more revolutions than your inside tire, just because it has to go a farther distance as you're turning. And so what an LSD limited slip differential does is that clutch pack can engage and still allow the inside tire to spin slower than the outside tire so that you don't get tire scrub. Alright? With a zero slip differential or a welded diff, you don't have that option. You just are going to be putting the same number of revolutions to each axle all the time, even when you're turning. So as you go around corners, your inside tire will chirp and scrub because it has to turn the same number of revolutions as your outside tire, which it doesn't want to do because it's turning. Right? Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. That's why we're taking this out, and that's why I've really been wanting to get an R160, because I didn't really want to weld the diff. I would be willing to, but a R160 finally came up for the right price. I only had to pay 50 bucks for it, which is fantastic because everything else I've seen online is over 100, usually 150. eBay is ridiculous and can go up to like 300, which is a joke because it's just a diff. Even my junkyard wanted to charge me 80 bucks and they weren't even an LSD rear diff. So I said, forget that, I will weld this and deal with the price of tires, because yes, it will, running a welded diff will wear out your tires faster, but if I was going to have to pay 300 bucks for an LSD, it would be more cost effective to just buy new tires however often they wear out. So that was kind of my thinking behind waiting to get a really good deal on an LSD as opposed to a welded diff. So do your research, see if you can find an LSD in your area if you're doing a rear wheel drive, and if not, it would probably be worth it to just weld the diff, because tires, at least the tire size that I'm running, is relatively small and it's relatively common, and that means tires are cheap. I can buy a brand new tire for 45 to 55 bucks on Amazon, which is the same price as an LSD, or the same price that I wanted to pay for an LSD. Anyway, that's my spiel. Something to think about, you know, price of tires versus price of the part. Okay, so I rotated this around, and you can actually get to 2 at the same time, which is a lot better than having to do 1 at a time. Obviously, these 2 bolts are the only thing supporting this half of the differential, so I think I need to come in with my jack right up through here and just jack it up to give it the support it needs so it doesn't bend anything or break my bolts over here or anything, because I'm really not sure what's going to happen because it is a super heavy part. Surprisingly, rear differentials are like 80 pounds. Probably not that much, but now we're going to come over to this end and pull these big guys off. Zooey mama. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is drain the rear diff fluid, and all you need to do that is a 1/2 inch, probably a breaker bar to start with, and then just a 1/2 inch ratchet to get it kind of loose. You also want to come in and pull this piece off so that you can drop the drive line down. And once the drive line is dropped down, you can push the diff forward to get it out of the back. Okay, so with it down, you can pull down your drive shaft and just kind of move it over to the side. Right? So now we're going to lower our jack and see if we can get this to drop down a bit so we can get these bolts out of the way. There we go. So I'm free of those bolts now. So I should be able to go forward. Yeah, there we go. I'm gonna get my jack and stick it up underneath and jack it up a bit, I think, so I can see if I can get these axles out all the way, because it's just the axles that are holding it in. So if we can get them out, I guess the other thing I could do is just unbolt this axle safety support rear cross member dealio and drop it down and be able to get it out that way if I can't do anything else up top. And actually, if you did that, I don't even think you would need to take apart the whole hub, which might be kind of cool and nice to not have to touch anything on the outside. You just pop these down and then you drop the whole thing down, and these pop out as it drops down because it just, their angle gives them more space. That would be kind of cool. Why didn't I think of that earlier? Oh well. We're actually gonna just do that. Okay. 12s. Obviously this would be way easier if you dropped your exhaust, but for some reason the idea of dropping my exhaust is always something I don't want to do, even though it's one of the easiest things to take off. Here we go. Okay. Now, let's see. There we go. There she blows. All right. Oh. Woohoo! So I have the original differential out of the car, and I have my new LSD that's ready to go back in the car, but I need to switch these two studs onto this new one. So what you do is you go and you grab both those stud bolts and you screw them on to one stud. And then you take the second one and you screw it on right behind it. Now you put one over the end and just tighten it up. You grab another wrench, then you can just unscrew the inside one. Actually, I like this one better. And it will unscrew your stud. Pretty slick way to get any stud out. If it's a exhaust head stud bolt or whatever, that's what you do. So you do the same thing for the other side, and then I'll show you how to put it in the new one. So then you screw it in using the outside one. I'm actually gonna do this. Then, you saw how that didn't turn the stud. You do the same thing. You loosen this one onto it, and that makes it so that you can tighten up the stud as much as you need. Then you just come here and unscrew that bolt. And unscrew the other. Just like that. Now you do that same thing for this other one. And then we'll be ready to do a final torque on all these bolts and put our new LSD up in the car. Okay, so now this is gonna be the tricky part, getting the axles back in. I do want to make sure that they don't have like debris on them. Alright. Like that. Yeah. Hope so. This is definitely not a one-person job, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, went on easy enough. How did I do that before? Okay. Forward. No. Forward will not work. Okay. Ugh. Okay, there we go. They're both in. So I'm gonna flip the front of it up and feed these in. To those. Wish me luck. Oh. Ouch. Okay. There we go. There we go. There we go. Whew. All right. So it is doable with one person. So once you're to this point, you're gonna come over here and put your drive shaft back in. Bolt up the piece that goes over the drive shaft, bolt up the rest of the piece that goes right here on the nose of your differential, bolt in those guys, put those little support bracket dealios back in on both ends, stick your exhaust back up, stick your tie rods back on, your shock back on, wheel back on, and then we can fill it. Sound good? Sounds good to me. So I got the axles on, right? But I couldn't get them popped in, and just doing this kind of thing doesn't really do much. And so here's a trick that I figured out to help get these in and locked on without having to like slam a hammer or a sledge on the end of the axle to get it in here. Anyway, this is the trick that I figured out. It works really well. You just come up here. It's kind of harder on this exhaust side, but you come up here with a pry bar and you use those support thingies to pop it in. Obviously it's super simple, but it works really well, and it's one of the only ways that I've figured out how to get those in and know that they're seated. So just a bit of advice for anybody putting rear axles on. Okay, so I have everything here bolted and torqued. I have these two bolted and torqued. I have these bolted. I need to torque them still, but they're 12, so I probably don't need to torque them. Another thing that I'm doing, as you can see here, I'm using copper-based anti-seize. I've worked on a lot of suspension parts on Subarus, and I always have older Subarus, and I don't think it really matters how much older. Anything that has gone through probably 5 years or so is a mess to get apart suspension wise. So I hate doing suspension work because everything is always seized, rusty, super grimy, and a massive pain to get apart, right? So I figure I put all the time and effort into taking stuff apart and getting these bolts loose, that if I ever have to get back in here and do anything again, I don't want to have to deal with it. So I spent $5 on Amazon and got like this monster thing of anti-seize. And whenever I do any suspension work, I use anti-seize to put everything back together with. So I just put a little bit on the bolts and put them back on, because that ensures that I won't have to have issues getting stuff apart. And especially with my rear diff, I'm not sure on the power capacity and everything, and how it's going to deal with being rear-wheel drive. And so I've heard people that have issues that blow out their rear diffs, and I really didn't want to have issues getting this back off if I ever have to pull out the diff and replace the diff again. So I'm making sure to put a little bit of anti-seize on each bolt and each stud before I run it in, so I don't have issues if I ever need to get it apart in the future. So now I'm going to move on to putting my driveline back on, and then I can get out to the outsides and put everything out here back together. So last night when I was working and inspecting the gears and the differential, I was trying to get these off, but I couldn't get enough torque without it bolted up in place to pull these out. And so I need to put oil in it. And so now that everything is bolted in, I can pull these off. Holy suck. Okay, so the bottom one pops free relatively easily, but this one, are you kidding me? This is the filler hole. Okay, there we go. Wow. So if you're just replacing diff fluid, always take the top one out first, because if you can't get this one out, you can't refill it. So don't go and pull this out and drain all your fluid before you even try and open this. Any kind of condition that the fluid is in is better than having no fluid, right? So take the top one out first. You can break them, either of them, loose first, but make sure you get the top one out so you don't have a nightmare on your hands. Holy suck, that's really tight. Whew. But since there's no diff fluid in this one, obviously it doesn't matter. Whew. I don't think they need to be that tight. That is my opinion anyway. So now I need to get the car level. And I really like using these bottles because you can actually get in here to do it. You can also use like a pump on a gallon jug, but lots of times those are pretty crappy. There we go. See it starting to run out? If I wipe it, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Yep. So, screw that buddy back in. Alright, there we go. You're good to go. Okay, so with the LSD in, I can turn the drive line and you can see both axles moving. So that's why you want an LSD, to get power to both of them. It should be pretty good. I'm excited. Now I just got to put my tires back on and then drop it back on the ground and put my end links back on, because you have to do those with it sitting on the ground. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more episodes. I have a bunch more content that's on its way. In the next couple of weeks I'll be turboing this, so definitely stay tuned for that. It should be fun. Check me out on Instagram for daily updates. I post on Instagram before I post on YouTube, weeks in advance. So the stuff that I'm currently working on is going up on Instagram daily at Dirtcheapdaily. Click the link below to my Instagram page and you can see what I'm currently working on. If you don't have Instagram, I'm also on Facebook and Twitter at Dirtcheapdaily. We'll see you next time.